Oh yeah, tan nam jun de je de simja tan je ge don do top jala na ma je san je ko ma mo je ne ya to ba cha ane de che do ta kan je jang ju sim ba lam ja nan cui shi do nyang zo ma lao la ta bi do nyang zo lang ge la wa le xian ko xian ba de tuo ko tuo le je shu ma no wa ko ju an ka zo ba de la bi ge shu de ge sa ta che.
And so then, as normally, we set our motivation to do whatever we possibly can to attain the pure state of enlightenment by perfecting all the trainings on the Bodhisattva path. And in order to perfect those trainings, we know that we must rely on an unmistaken path, an unmistaken presentation of the content of that path. And that in order to do that, we are here this morning listening to a teaching from the Graduated Path series of teachings.
我这三类药物是当为呢，他就告诉的这个他把他们这钱把掏把了，而且严重的什么买都没有嘛的，他严重的什么买都没有，而且对大概的严重的什么就等来讲究个事，等来当年都会写了这个参考个多，但我这当然药物是这么一呢，我让做第三个难的了，让给六个我的什么当然一打，而且这个让给那三个那个我的什么当然一打，而且大概的就让给。 아니 지금 가서다 다까지 제 고유게 다 지금演员给我的他甚至让给他这个多么了说我大概这让给他教育跟这做什么当年的这个刚刚的什么呀我就当然呢我那个南北给那句的呀我新的当年什么呀我当然呢刚刚的确实被全接受了差这个多确实被全接受了差那当然呀我马上那说是没几把钱点这个的那老是给么多但没几把没把钱了什么呀我就当然呢 这个东南个是用不起，但这个东南个是人家得了他把这马上那他没这个去，我觉得真大概这个当不东南写不加死，但是这样的当不东南写不加，说个多当不东南的，我马这位呢东南了他就老几个嘛的嘛，东南写不加，俺这呢俺这东南就干的东南，俺这在那东南写不加，俺这在那俺这东南写完的，俺这东南加干的在这呢。 아니 두 군주에 봐 뭐쳐 맞지 아니 두 군주에 봐 뭐쳐는데 아니 그때 빠에게 아니 탑도 담도 와다 군주는 내 군주다 너무 군주 내가 또어디 너무 군주 아니 너무 군주 파바도나 다들 말이 걸어 두고요 아니 뒤년부터 담도 뒤년부 여봐 이나 아니 들어 탑을 부여 봐 아니 뒤년부터 담에 또 베셔라 있나 다 담에 또 베셔라 뒤고 말할 때는 아니 아들의 탑에 타바 타고 이었다 두다면도 어다 들었잖아 제발잖아 아니 오늘잖아 다 랑게 가서데 루그 거네 삼로탄에다 랑게 내단 근데 뭐네 삼로탄에 단단 내상에 내단 되지 척 뭐네 삼로탄에 폰지 콜에 타려다 타바다 탐제 주베 꾸마 되게 소치 어때 이제 렌토바 이나 아니 랑게 최 시바도 고쳐 맞지 최고로 없을 잡아도 고쳐봐 찾고 어디다 네가 그걸 안 고봐 야고 시 어디를 시
So we begin by really, we must think about our own surroundings, our own situation, our own status, our own friends, our own relatives, and to really reflect on that, very, very incisively. And it is in order to really generate renunciation. As we have often heard, renunciation is very much the basis on which we can build in the mind of enlightenment, the basis for which we can thereafter gain a proper understanding of the correct view of enlightenment and so on. And it forms the key component for gaining real kind of liberation from cyclic existence, and further, like it's sort of like a founding step for liberation and the omniscient state of enlightenment. And so this body that we have with us, this place that we're living in, our friends and relatives, workmates all around us, we really have to work at seeing them as conditions, conducive conditions for us to be able to engage in spiritual practice. And this is to remind ourselves that we are in cyclic existence, which is in the nature of suffering itself. And that our objective is to gain that sense of definite emergence, to liberate ourselves from this state which is in the nature of suffering. And so it's, as the Buddha has pointed out, know suffering, know what it is, know what is at the heart of it, and then know what the causes of suffering are. What is the source of suffering? And that's here to be able to kind of look at the presentation of that path, saying, know suffering, know the causes of suffering, and then we ask, is it possible to gain some sense of a release or cessation of that suffering? And that is there a possibility of gaining freedom from that suffering? And we're looking to, when we look into it in more detail, we see that the very root cause of that suffering is this mindset of grasping at the self or inherent existence of a self entity. And so therefore, then thereafter the question arises, is there an antidote to that mind? Is there a solution to that? And that is presented as the wisdom of emptiness, of selflessness. And so here, then it's kind of, and that then becomes the main cause. That realization of that emptiness or selflessness becomes the main cause for us to be able to gain release or definite emergence or liberation from cyclic existence. It's kind of that the kind of the sequence for on which we can build our mind. And so it's kind of really this recognition of where we're at in an ordinary conventional sense. The mind we have, the body we have, the house we have, the place we're living in, the friends we have, the people who we come across every day, the situations that we find ourselves in every day. These must become the conducive conditions for us to engage in practice and keep our mind in practice. And this is referred to as really the re-entry into the path of Dharma as on the outset. And it's kind of like this understanding and this kind of capacity to integrate our lives with the Dharma is the initial sign of a genuine Dharma practitioner.
다가저 미스 고주네 도다 점바 정부로 와 다들 맞지 맞잖아 아니 강에 쳐서 다 참스 페는 차잖아 단다 록다운 제라 다 미모고저 셈마지 맞아 강에 쳐네 대도 와 강에 쳐네 대도 요다 안 다다다 저 록다운 맞지 봐 이나니 아니 그래서 나사 권에 아니 룩 강에 쳐고 요래 아니 소할 줘야 내가 요래 다 록다운 교리 뭐잖아 야 셈감라 네 야 쌈도 땅땅라 야 나사 셔바 줘야 내가 와 연구도 왔다 내가 가르쳐서 딱 이게 지가서데 지 코웨기 끼어라 따들 코웨 님을 따들에 타바지 마도 와이나 딜레 탐색제 마도 마도나 모두네 동네인데 용해래 섬다 저한테 아니 내가 나 타바 탐색제 마 줄을 배주 땅도 와이나 아니 지 대외 유창이 와 되게도 와.
And so whatever is happening for us, good, bad, or indifferent, we have to become experts at transforming those experiences into causes for liberation and causes for the attainment of enlightenment, causes for definite happiness for us in the future. This makes for a meaningful life. And it's so important that we understand this, particularly in situations like lockdown that we're experiencing now, where, it's often the case, isn't it, that when the kind of our circumstances are squeezed in a sense, like they are during lockdown now, that not a lot of people only see it as a kind of a pool of suffering for themselves. they're constantly meeting with extra suffering, extra problems because of that, whether it's a physical illness or degeneration of mental illness because of being in such constrained circumstances and so on. Whereas there is an alternative. An alternative is that one has trained the mind to recognize all conditions, good and bad, as conducive conditions for engaging in spiritual practice. And that's what we must see in order to make this life as meaningful as possible.
What the 가서 외세 줘발을 때는 예윤일 외세 줘 예를 외세 줘발을 때는 가서 딱같이 저와 잡아 공부라 딱같이 안제 파고 토멜라서베 딱같이 지금 자치주주 라만고 아니 가서 예를 외세 줘발을 때는 딱같이 저도 잡아야라 아니 공부루들라서베 딱같이 안제 가서 다 사모타요 주게 아니 가서 다 나중에 과제 안 대상들 아니 가담게 다 슈바발라리바 내가 봐체 대상의 정보를 못 통과 주바체 다디 doing the language social talk, doing the language Lamala, and Chitomoto Lamako. That then Judici, that Lamene, the Juju, and then a Casa Sanya Toncha, dinner, and it's Casodata, and you're sitting there so chance of Papa dinner, Ragia, Judge of the Papa ticket dinner, near to check dinner, Power country children from Mataka, social and Masawa Mavach, what are the do the setup? 안 소제도 다가 지원 좀 봐. 투가 홀로 research 좀 생각하자는 이시번에 제안자는 팀은 자오버 뉴스만 봐 줘서 나간지 이시번 뭐 그런 쇼수서 어떤지.
Then, as normally in the context of this text, we set up the merit field now, and so we visualize in the space in front of us the central figure of Shakyamuni Buddha, and one skillful in means, greatly compassionate, and from that central figure, light rays emanating out and establishing all the other areas and members of the merit field, beginning with the lineage of consecrated practices headed by Vajradhara above, and then to the right, the lineage of the extensive practices headed by Maitreya, including such luminaries as Arya Asanga, etc. And then on the left, we have the lineage of the profound view headed by Manjushri, including Arya Nagarjuna, etc. And then all of the members of the Kadampa lineages on both sides, the school of the textual school, the Lam Rim school, and the personal instruction school. And below them on both sides, the Geluk tradition with Jai Rinpoche at the center. And then at the foot of the throne on which the central figure is sitting, I apologize, that we have the grouping of our own teachers, our own gurus, with our own root guru at the center. And then just below and around them are the four sets of the tantric deities. Again, below them, the 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate eon. And then the Arya Bodhisattvas, the heroes, the solitary realizers, the Arhats, the heroes, and the Dakastakinis, the Dharma protectors, so that we have established all of the members of the merit field without exception. We see also that they are marked in the three places by Om, Ah, and Hum, and light rays emanating from that Hum enter out and invite the wisdom beings from their natural abodes, and they come and they dissolve into each and every member of the merit field.
어디를 공부하셔? 다가 이제 저도 봐 링단에 안 뒤쪽에는 답변을 소속에 올다나 초점 나로라 산제 구다 답변을 저 소속에 라면 구다부터 구바다부터 요바이나 왔다 뒤쪽에는 어디랬잖아 소식 셋업 전에 아니 다가 이제 답변을 구til에 안 지원 좀 두가를 위해서 신랑들 28점 다운바 무엇보다 팀 어디를 공부하셔 봐이나 왔다 지금 가서도 아니 랑게 돼 가서도 다 제가 되고도 추와 피와 이내 다다 소사 집장 그 저번에 누가 쳐 보려고 와 누가 쳐 보려고 왔다 간제 와들 단도 소신 세타와나 신전에 아니 유교도 랑게 추숍 나다 디발라 간제 이바 이내 아니 고통도 간제 저번에 왔다 되게 아니 다다 제가 삼아 땅도 와 이나 아니 랑게 가서도 추와 비싸게 아니 가서 네 가서 추와 비싸 유티게 돼 아니 봐 운에 보라 요 삼사게 아니 된다 아니 다가는 시 추와 필요 랑 저 페리시다면 어디를 켜고 있고요 왔다 간제 다도 초심 검도 쪼면도 거도 이내 아니 배를 랑 산제 구조만 구들에 주어 저마 두가 류에서 신람의 이시바 젠더는 좀 삼사체 아니 군들랑 그 추와 근데 아니 저 초조 산제 탐제를 추와 필요 이거로 와 왔다 되게 켜고 있고요 왔다 강가를 봐 잘시 받체
So, this kind of thinking, of really powering up the merit field by offering, reflecting on their being marked by the syllables hung at the crown, the throat, and the heart, then the light emanating from the hung at the heart, inviting the wisdom beings to come and dissolving into them. That is, it's not just to be confined to the kind of scenario that we are doing now, or in simply generating the merit field, but in fact, in our everyday practice, in our altar, our Dharma spot, our Dharma place, where we have our statues or representations of the Buddha and our gurus there, to do exactly the same, to really feel that they are marked also by Hum, that light rays emanate, inviting wisdom beings to come and dissolve into them, so that when we make offerings to the altar, we do our practices of purification and the accumulation of merit, they gain a great deal more power and efficacy. Because of that, we have made our place and our altar that much more sacred, so to speak. And so it's it's important that in these kind of teachings as well, to be aware that to integrate the kind of details and techniques and so on into our daily practices can be very, very helpful and very, very important.
아니 가서 찾아와다 주의 시험을 계속 겨워서 담대하게 자주 치고 온 것은 나가지 문에 보란 지금 가서라 당가자 차세와 아니 지금 추와 표와 아니 다가는 시 샤과 제와 랑게 세디를 사바 겨워와 되어 토면서 리바드 지와 마 작답지에 어제서 원 찾아와 주의 시험 아니 제서 라시 겨워를 제소 딱히 가상가에 겨워를 제소 이러 와서 다산게다 자주 삼바다 아니 얘랑게 겨워 안 다가는 시 소득이 개발라 소마다 수이네 아니 믹스에게 라는 개발이 뭐 매긴 되게 개발 당연 뭐춘 될 제수이다 제를 깨쳐버 뭐들 더 차도 기도 와 어떻게 차도 기나 미루 와래 왔다 되는 어떻게 공부신데 딱 이제 제수이다 제수 추지 샤와 아니 저거 아니 양을 메다 소와대 왔다 아니 다가는 다 야라도 뭐 메대 잡아 거네 아니 저 거서도 딱 가져 어떻게 조사 집장제 어떻게
So then at this point, we offer the 7 limbs practice and the mandala. And here it's important not just to kind of brush this over, but to kind of take each element of the 7 limbs and to try to engage or integrate it in some fashion, from paying homage, prostrations, to the offerings that we are making, to the purification of our negativities, and the confession and purification of those negativities. That we are also, rejoicing in the good merits of ourselves and all others, and that here, not just the holy beings, the people who we are fond of, and so on, but it's especially important to include the rejoicing in the virtue of those who we dislike, who we are on bad terms. This is a very good antidote for overcoming jealousy, envy of their goodness, and so on. And then to really request that the Buddha not enter into parinirvana, but to remain and stay and teach, and then offering the dedication for all of these merits.
아니 이게 다 찍了찍된 거 뭐냐 야 최종 수마진도 찍了찍된 거 야도 랑게 지지 자vel 최종 모두 지지 자vel 라마 됐다지 아니 가서 정말 라마 동가 지금 좀 어디가 찍了찍된 거 야제 다 가서 좀 어디야 아니 가서도 다 가서도 다 가서도 다 잠잠해 내가 파지 다 내가 찍了찍된 거我참 사모다 자주 주주고 되겠대 오늘 가서 사모다제다 아니 자주 주베 주대다 내가 지달 주베 라마 되게 찍了찍된 거 전 저叫多强怕的，我那老么了别，这来也了我们这这我真的吃，说啥吃啥吃，这来大叫多的强的，那基本的嘛学了，大概就是出去做那么多多强怕的，因为讲讲你的那么多多强，那个这些咱们那么的那么多多强人都个可做，但你要说生活我真的恐怕些，我真的吃。
And so then again, as described in previous teachings, that one, if we have the time to do the kind of making of offerings here, very extensive, like such as offering of the bath, the cleaning, and the fresh clothing, and so on, and follow through with the kind of visualization as was described before. Then we engage in the dissolution of the merit field, again from the members of the Dharma protectors and the Dakas and the Kinis and so on, dissolving upwards until you are left with the single figure of our own root guru. They are just at the foot of the throne of the main figure. And then on the left and right, the grouping headed by Jay Rinpoche, the Galuk lineage lamas, all dissolving up through the again the Kadampa lineages, through the extensive practices and profound view lineages, respectively, to end with Lord Maitreya and then Lord Manjushri. And then finally the consecrated practices lineage dissolving upwards until we are left with Vajradhara. So we have then briefly focus on the 5 main remaining figures of the merit field before Vajradhara descends to dissolve into the crown of the central figure of Guru Munindra Vajradhara. The left and right, Lord Maitreya and Manjushri coming in to dissolve into the main figure of Guru Munindra Vajradhara. And then our own root guru up to the heart center and dissolving into the heart of our own Guru Munindra Vajradhara.
我这里讲，大概这个，告诉你叫多几场，告诉当然那么突然多场，那么多场的，那么想突然多场都过来，你叫多场都过来，这个什么会议，我的什么顺序，我这里恐怕写，我这里讲
So the Guru Munindra Vajradhara is the figure of the Buddha with Vajradhara at the heart, not the heart of Vajradhara, our own Guru. And so this is the makeup of the figure of Guru Munindra Vajradhara.
我这里恐怕写，我这里讲，他的呢，那个他个那个他那么多场的了，那告诉他，他个这孤独诺不路线，我的感觉他的，那个他感觉三姐他这个单一点，我这里讲，他的那真的他的了，他的。남주 때 가서라다 저 통하게 생각하던 산에 되게나 어다 디고도 미포톤은 통하게 생각하게 아니 두배 뭐 공기는 어떻게 돼 다다다 뭐 마티 삼다다 다 두배 오버 되니 아니 봐 어다 오래다 안데는 다다지 가서다 다다지 구시다 라마라 통화도 차라 소화도 지금 추가달 통화도 저 어떻게 아니 가서 다가저 그저 소화 부수도 되베데 소대 제체 어떻게 돼
So here then is to really remind ourselves that the last remaining figure of the merit field, Guru Munindra Vajradhara, is the embodiment of all Buddhas, of all refuge. Here we can also then recite the name mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha for some time, and also offer the stake-like supplication, which is traditional, beginning with my most divine Guru, Lord of the Four Kayas, I make petition to you, Shakyamuni Vajradhara, etc.
或者是，等待这个让给中了，当严重的甚至三了大，也把主要严重的呢，三了的呢，就为了别嘛，他们也把就做三三千，等待当年都被写了了，有点等这个是不是三千恐怕就拿是不卡巴多，这把这，等嘛你把大家让个三千，等这个落地呢， 这个说的，大概这你们经过这个读书说的，但是他们这个都三界国嘛，都他们这个上在看用个什么给，参与个什么专门出这个派给，安尼等这个逻辑，单位经过这个读书说的，等那把这这个，那么这个单位就我并不是，可能这么的不足我这这顺着讲完了，单位告诉派，你别告诉说别个告诉，安尼让你这么表嘛的，你们单位到安尼呗。三界国嘛，都把这这说的说，实在我真的不行。
So now we prepare the seat on our own crown for the invitation of the central figure of Guru Manindranath Vajradhara to come there. And here, reflecting on renunciation, on this nature of cyclic existence, in the nature of suffering arising from that, this sense of definite emergence of wanting to attain a release from that state of suffering, we produce the lotus mandala seat, and then reflecting on this self, wanting to attain enlightenment. Where is this self we're looking for? That inherently or truly existent self, and not finding it, and resting on that mere lack of the finding of the object of negation, and arising from that wisdom, the sun disk mandala. And then understanding that, on the basis of that, we want to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. The sense of Advaita, or the mind of enlightenment, produces the moon disk mandala seat. Then we can, having prepared our seat on her crown, and now we make the invocation prayer to invite the Guru to our crown. Our glorious and precious Guru, come take a lotus and moon seat placed here on my crown. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of your body, speech, and mind. And after the first recitation, the figure moves towards us. The second arrives, and after the third recitation, we feel that they have established themselves there steadfastly until we ourselves attain enlightenment.
我他感觉我这是空白时间，他感觉初心三单位的让给他这个老人给多把句来接就说，俺初三这讲接，我这是讲初心三单不到初三这把讲我这是讲初心是。这当有给我讲了，当没有初三这讲结果有了我这是讲，俺那等那他初心这个牙句呢，俺让给就我那么多像光西边俺那他这个老人。他常常知道，关心你点最点去送出个报道，他这个他从那看看这点嘛就呢，这个相关出的，把什么大钱或者是钱
And so then to remind ourselves that the generation of the merit fields like this, dissolution of the merit field like this is always to facilitate our meditations on the subject matter of the graduated path in order to effect realizations of those paths and how important the process of purification and the accumulation of merit is in the context of the merit field, that it is regarded as this extraordinary object towards which we can purify and towards which we can accumulate positive energy, positive merit. And so it's very, very important that we recognize that, and then at this point to, as extensively as we can, then to meditate on the subject matter of the graduated path, from how to realize, from starting with how to properly relate to a spiritual teacher, and then if we are short of time, just do a glance meditation on the key points of all of those subjects.
我的想他，我的想，我的大胆的，我就告诉别人，大感觉这，我大感觉这个。现在个发展的来掉了，现在发展的我真的真的，大感觉这个就是，大感觉这个到元素对吧？人呢，当三界个那这个，他说的，他全部给这些到了什么？他说了他也不去，他到那边呢，这个北外界拿了北界拿修的，本来感觉不得加的给，大概那些个感觉个第专家，大概这些这一个，他这个叫做他讲话开发个凶，大感觉研究。不仅你就送去再去个，我大概这个做着的，他短大保上这做的，讲究个他不得写了比了多的多，讲究个什么东西都没写了，今年一个他，嘛接，哎接吧，关了可是背过来是， 다 돈다 되게 또 돈다 되게 또 다가는 시가 지금 도당가 가르시와 이내 돈다 또한테 장주가서 돈이 또 배시랑 다 권에 권도 배치 제도를 도와 근데 제단 그렇게 구입이 다 라신 니가 그 타치바지 죽고 있나 아니 지금 람데니 줄했겠네 아니 고마 타치바지 마소바이나 라신 니가 그 타치바 죽고 민도스 다 되게 이 마도바지 다 산지게 깨바네 깨베가 봐도 제바체네 오다디 람디를 샤스 디레 샤바지 민도스 오다 소야다 돈다저 또 되는 거야
So we have been arrived at the this part of the graduated path presentation dealing with the 6 perfections, and we are looking at the final one, the 6th, the perfection of wisdom. And so it's to be understood also how key the presentation of the graduated path teachings are in our ability to really not just get an insight into, but also practice the entire body of the teachings of the Buddha. There are in the Tibetan language 108 volumes dealing with just the words of the Buddha himself that have been collected. And then the collection of these commentaries on those teachings by the great masters in India and indeed Tibet as well amount to more than 200 volumes that are also a key part of the Tibetan canon. And so they deal with the method side and the wisdom side of the teachings. The method side concentrating on the generation of the mind of enlightenment, and the wisdom side is centering on this wisdom of emptiness. And so we can see it is no kind of like exaggeration to say that the whole canon of the Buddha's teachings, the whole import of the graduated path presentation of those teachings is in order to generate these 2 minds and to allow those 2 minds to flourish, to increase more and more. As we say in the prayers, that we want to generate the mind of enlightenment, may it flourish more and more and more. We want to generate that mind of emptiness, may it flourish again, increase more and more and more. And so the questions are, how do we do this? What are the techniques and what are the instructions that we must follow in order to do this? And so here it's presented in the graduated path format as the means by which we can not only generate these minds of enlightenment and the wisdom of emptiness, and in doing so, we will not only fulfill our own purpose, but fulfill the purpose of others as well. And that how do we know that this information is valid and is reliable? Because the Buddha has actually come to this understanding himself from life to life to life to life after life after life, analyzing, practicing, checking out, and he has reached this quintessential information saying, I have gained this insight through my own experience. This is how it's done, and here's the path I'm presenting to you. This is it.
그래. 딱 번째 시럽 연구가 타마들 요해들에 다 교수 산재 탐재는 시외 라보체 디레스 마템보다 교수 산재 탐재자 나 대바 다다 산재 시바 마오바 산재와 그가 아니 람딜라데 조네 서지 송고도와
So it's saying that the Buddhas of the past, those attaining enlightenment now, and those who will attain that state of Buddhahood in the future, must all and will all follow this path. This is the path to attain that state.
나에다 유대를 좀 당게 도대 나와다도 좀매야 아삼잡지 나와다도 좀매야 아삼잡지 다 지금 랑게 지금 가서대 딱 같이 저 켈레마서 많이 받잖아 켈레마서 많이 받잖아 샘진에 딱 같이 가서다 지금 가서대 커다 쳐봤어. 유대는 주바는 유자매 아서 커다 쳐봤지. 좋아. 좋아. 빼내 찾아봐이나. 지금 가서래. 빼내 찾아봐이나. 지금 다들 뮤지션 다들 가서 지금 다들 저 가서래. 다들 가서래. 다들 가세게 아니 지금 도당 신다 되는데 아니 지금 나 잡네. 아니 저 강부签다보다 다자고던데 이제 그 다가 저 가서대 주원에들 열바 다들 뮤지션들 열바 얘네 프랑게 나의 따는 거 열어 얘네 나의 따는 거 열때 또 말이 sometimes 그 딩는 게 맞게 돼요 봐 그러다 다가 저 가서대 다들 가서대我经常是真的，他经常是个真的，说出给他结巴钱的，有点的主吧，伊那，俺那主比如说的，再觉得你个，但你个买就，那个有点的嘛主吧的，大这个有的，大这个有的，大吃肯定是那玩意嘛伊那样，是那个吃肯定是那玩意嘛呢，有点主吧，那个都在那玩意都主买什么去，是吧？主买什么这个他，你把定的你把这个做过有的。经常是他在这个说的뮤지션的这个和这个新的这样的等等了，不然都俺讲的，这个你把它俺你把给，俺那大那些浪不钱那些，我的那个说这个有吧，他都说这个有就，你大的浪不钱嘛，因为他他还这个有的，我他经常性就说了，经常性这个他你把你多少钱，这个有的，我真的。
So these twin minds of the mind of enlightenment and the wisdom analyzing or realizing emptiness are, not just as kind of for kind of discrete meditations now and again, but something that we need to have to the forefront of our mind at all times. Like we're using all situations to kind of keep this in mind as much as we possibly can, and to kind of again, when we talk about wanting to increase more and more the mind of enlightenment, increase more and more the wisdom of emptiness. Therefore, we are kind of like really, it behoves us to find opportunities to reflect on these minds constantly. And particularly with regard to the wisdom of emptiness, that we train ourselves to understand that whatever phenomena appears to the mind, that we remind ourselves that it does not exist, or it is not established in the way in which it appears, that there is something amiss in the way it appears. And that this is something akin to the great example of the magician or the illusionist who kind of blows spells on some stones and some wood to produce the illusion of horses and elephants. And that and even so, they are kind of looking real to all the onlookers. The magician or the illusionist knows for sure that they do not exist in the way that they appear. He knows the trick behind the appearance. And so this is something that we need to be able to gain from our own analysis. When we analyze again and again and again this the nature of reality of the self or any phenomena, that the way it appears to us, then it appears to exist in a certain way of existing, like it's established from its own side, and then we put that to analysis. We look for that self or that phenomenon to see that whether it exists like that or not, and we do not find it. And that findness, that not establishing it, not finding it in that way, we really, as it were, kind of like to really, how do you say, really take that on board in our own minds again, to understand that whatever phenomena arise, whenever that phenomena arises, is not to be taken, is not to be acceded to in the way in which it appears. It does not exist in that way. And to keep reminding ourselves like that the things are not established in the way that they appear. And that to gain that sort of very strong conviction, the same as that illusionist, you know what the trick is, you know what's going on. These are not real horses and elephants that are appearing before me. These are just a fabrication based on the spells and so on. And this is the same with appearances that arise to the mind. They are not inherently existent. They're not objectively existent out there. They do not exist in the way that they appear, and I'm not going to accede or believe that anymore.
我这里讲的，大概这个我这里讲，我这里讲的，大概这那的语言的主吧，在刚才的这个人家话语言的主吧，这个看呀，对外面个把那这个都的，那我那都主办什么，那我到主办什么，大概这个我的那个大概这个刚才的，但看了吧怎么样吧，真的呗，你要把定出吧去，你要把定出吧去呗。定出吧去，我打你把你出去过的，他这个可是的，怎么给了白家伙的，怎么给你把定了你掉了，但是我那过来打拉马的是呢，本来怎么这个这边本来我这边呢，本来找了家他妈就可以，这个是修个 plan 白把这个，那讲这找了家他妈说是呢，找了家他妈说是呢，快点，同样的找了家他妈通过要的，现在找了家他妈嘛，一把可以把定了你掉了嘛，定了你的话，他你把定了你的，我他真的那些真的，大概这我那个的这个，他说的有的人做的没做，七八千往的，8千往的，俺那个这个有的人做嘛就把年往的，可是他有的在那买你多的，他买你把的，他买不得买不得，买你把的，有的人嘛就把得了搞错去，真的是他。就跟这几把人呢，那当的起啊，什么啥子？那当的起啊，什么啥子？他落了差多把人呢，俺那第二天呢，俺那娘们接触耶，娘们出的，他们我说的到的，俺那娘们早晚的那把差出来，娘们都不多，我这讲。
So the way in which phenomena appear to us, as if they were self-established, something independent, not depending on anything else. And that here we have to gain the absolute conviction that this is incorrect, that there's something wrong with this picture, that phenomena do not exist in the way that they appear. And that this is a case of gaining really deep felt conviction with regard to this. That's something that is kind of, kind of there in our mind again and again and again and again and again to overcome the ignorance of self-grasping and so on. And so it's like, you kind of think, a person produces a piece of paper and then through to casting a spell on the paper, it's turned into what looks like $100 bill. And, you've seen what the process you're looking at looks like a genuine $100, but yourself it's counterfeit. It is wrong. There's a mistake here. And so that, again, like when through your analysis, through constant analysis and checking out, okay, everything appears to exist in a certain way, but when you look for that particular way in which it appears, you're never going to find it, constantly not finding it. And so, to remind yourself that this not finding, I must not conclude that therefore it does not exist, but that such a self, for example, does not exist, but that it does not exist in that way. It does not exist in the way in which it appears. And that's what you conclude. And so here, if you are making progress with this analysis, and especially if you are integrating that analysis and that understanding into your daily life, you should notice a reduction in the mental afflictions, a reduction in the power of mental affliction over your mind, to the point that eventually you will be able to cut through the mental afflictions completely.
对，大概这牛毛生的，土啥的，马土的，大致马里过来土个的，他第年不搞呢，大没到没现在比给他马这玩呢，就那么样，牛毛来看这土吧的，牛毛来看马这玩意呢，牛毛生的，除了有玩意呢，你刚才让别人刚才胖不起个，让别人刚才的了，大概这胖不起个，就告诉了。 녀몽스는 판매 돈에 종라베 돈에 거기에 종라안 되겠다. 종라안 되지도 요 말에. 녀몽스는 판매 돈에 종라베 돈에. 다들 이거 인자 아니 녀몽 탐제 따와 투사도 단체 말이 걸 투와 인자 이 녀모 담에 또 비셔라도 고마도 와나 뒤나야 녀모 발에 타와지 요거 말에. 아니 거기에 판매 거기에 종라 되게 차지가 봐. 좋아. 다른 것도 저기 맨날 코아파 나라도 셈젤 나라도라 다 냠요 요래. 거기 이내 대회 대화 되고 요때 대화 되고 참라 밑에 두개 집에 차바는 집 봐봐야지. 그 가르치고 그랬으나 다 너무 배고내라. 뒤 온게 레사네 아니 레사네 다 같이 지금 다 지금 동네 나서 봐지 찍내 타네 찍나마다 찍내 타네 찍나마다 지는 강에 채비고 봐. 다들 투사들 마마 투사들 아니 녀모를 두고 녀모 대야 다지 말이 걸어 두고 다디 녀모 담에 또 배셔도 막고 봐도 그 남에 타다면 되겠지. 그래도 와.
So what is the priority that should be given to this way of thinking and this approach? Well, we know that the mental afflictions that are at the heart of our discomfort and our disillusionment. And we know that the source of the mental afflictions is this grasping at the inherent existence or true existence of a self-entity. And so we need to be able to thoroughly adopt the antidote to that root affliction, the wisdom of selflessness. And this is the way, this kind of thinking is the way to do that. And because you know that until we are able to overcome the ignorance of self-grasping with the wisdom of selflessness, the wisdom of emptiness, to cut through that root affliction, that we are always going to be harmed by the mental afflictions. After all, this is the very etymology of these words. These are mental afflictors. They harm us. They create fault and loss for us. This is the nature of these mental afflictions. And so it's not a question of a temporary reprieve or a temporary solution. We need to aim for just cutting through the root of these mental afflictions. And that we know from our own experience that this is necessary. You know, we know how much we desire happiness. And here we must have, zero tolerance for mental affliction. If we have that, then we have zero tolerance for this root cause of mental affliction, this grasping at a self-entity. And so this is the reason why we need to really to kind of like continuously have this attitude of disbelieving in appearance and reaffirming that phenomena do not exist in the way that they appear, in order to really strengthen that understanding of selflessness and emptiness in our minds.
아니 지금 너무 빠 마토가 봐도 아니 못 주네 아니 너무 그 동네 나대 아니 동네 나대에 이 감들라 아니 동네 싸바 먹고 주축돼 용되게 와 딱가서 레뉴게 샤와쟁게 아니 백겨와 봐 아니 딜레드네 아니 가메 레뉴게 동네 양을 이 동네 양십에 가라 깨지게야 동네 양에 그 싸바 먹고지야 싸되겠지 말이 백분해라 아니 녀모게 녀모를 내서 아근데 저는 딱 같이 저기 반 다지게 녀마를 추주래래야 안배 동에 파도 매매기 녀에게 안배 내 차타와 좀 망고 싸대지 요거 되기도 와.
So we can see that how kind of it is imperative that we kind of work towards eradicating this ignorance as quickly as possible until we are able to really fully establish the antidote of selflessness, the wisdom of selflessness, to overcome that root cause of ignorance of grasping at a self-entity. We are always going to be prone to suffering, because we're always going to be prone to the mental afflictions arising. And these mental afflictions not only bring us suffering of the moment, but we are, again, usually in a state of mind where we're creating more causes for suffering in the future because of that. And that's that we are very much under the cosh of karma and the mental afflictions, and that we know from our own experience this is the case. When we have a mental affliction arising, that is creating misery at the moment, but also laying down causes again for future suffering. And so every day, every hour, every minute of time, it can be like this. So it's kind of like really a case of taking a really strong priority of aiming to overcome this ignorance of grasping at a self-entity, of establishing the wisdom of selflessness, of emptiness in our mindset as firmly and as consistently as possible.
Okay. 다 엘리니마 사 사바디거든. 알리 커도 매와 소마도네. 사도 사모고 소마도는 배사하서 왔다. 니마 사 때문에 디칼라. 다 사도 못는 사식이야 왔다.
And so that's that situation, that reality of being unable to do anything to stop the insidious influence of this self, this kind of self-existing self concept. Not just creating suffering for us again and again in the present, but also it's kind of like reconfirming that mindset again and again as well, kind of strengthening that mindset again and again to ensure suffering again in the future. There's something insidious about that, and something rather tragic for ourselves in that reality.
我说我这个他这个桌上这个也或者上了马当一呢，俺我说对，我这个的，米这个东西的木头呢，所说的俺这个说的就这个说差这个多，所说的呗，就这个说是，俺俺啥他把这个的，让给了牛毛什么有吧？那俺啥他把这个的，俺 increase 点吧，可是怕这个多，但让给了牛毛什么的，那俺啥把这个的怕这个么多，地块多，俺是说什么啥也分个多。 但是那个修差的多，对面呢，让就牛毛修什么的得的话人呢，来啥吧，不木头的3个月吧，马上俺啥吧这个的，他感觉这个告诉了大家的 share market， 全咱们我说跟这个 share market 呢，我下巴都是差不多，啊，可是呢，牛毛都送给什么的让就了，要不然俺啥吧来这个的，你把修切increase差呢，差出来去。 아니 사도야 먹고 싶어 사대지 아니 되네 사모당은 어다 탈에 누가 매드는 소리 차대기 봐. 다 되네서 너무 되게도 막 쭉쭉다 당 건네 제발은 나 사바 되게 인크리스 마절라 핑그래 페르모돌라 핑그래 아니 소소 다다 사도에 마사발라 핑그래 봐. 다디 내가 좀 차대도 와.
So we can't afford not to be thinking like this, because of, again, by remaining in a state of being controlled by karma and the mental afflictions. It's not just a question of not dealing with the circumstances that create or generate the mental afflictions again in our minds, creating suffering for ourselves afresh. And also creating the causes for more suffering in the future, but even the causes that are on our mind will increase in their negative strength because we're not doing anything to counteract them. And so it kind of becomes imperative that we start to change our whole way of thinking with regard to this particular subject. And it's very, very important. Because of the powerful control of mental affliction that over our mindset, and the degree to which we are constantly in states where we fall under the influence of these mental afflictions. Like we said, it not only fails to deal with the situation skillfully at the time, in the present, but also it increases those causes that we have on our mind stream. Already for negativity and for the suffering result. So it's a case of avoiding getting into this kind of disillusionment or the sense of my mind is in such a state that I have no opportunity they will have no opportunity to gain liberation from cyclic existence. So we need to feed kind of like the positive sides of our mind more and more and more in order to counteract the kind of negative, depressing influence of the karma and the mental afflictions as well.
我的他这个的这个我是到哪也我是反正我是说的那话大呢，这个那面说的小呢，哎，到哪面我去来这个他去那个 news 了，到哪去叫来，那个说这个好当个人吧，到牛毛给当的吧，到哪去干嘛去吧去，来这个多，但是我说没这个他不能说是能把的，俺这个他把他们这么端那个了，他把他们这么给多的去那个弄的嘛的。 他们这做的，让个农民这个月子，让真正的，大家马里把这个月子，的，告诉的，收成不的收成的，买不说他就马家吧，人呐，我就刚才猜这个哇，我大概我的那个，他就公把写成了，他感觉就公把写成了，我到底上面是当过多我的。
And so this is something that we need to train our minds to become attentive to, and it's it's a question of like not just allowing kind of a lazy approach that we watch the news and we see all the negative information on that, and we kind of like have then go back and kind of like stew on that sort of thinking, creating more depressing, negative. Talk for ourselves in our own minds and laying down more negative thoughts in that way. That we are, we see ourselves as Buddhists. We see our goal is to attain the state of liberation, the omniscient state of enlightenment. And we see that the main obstacle to that is not anything external, like on the news or anything else. It's an internal issue. It's the self-grasping and self-cherishing minds that we have to deal with. And so we have to do everything to reduce the influence that those minds have on our daily life. And if we are not, mindful of that at all, that job, then we are leaving the door open to kind of like not simply reduce them, but they will increase in their influence over us. And we kind of be asking the question of why we're meeting so many problems in life.
我的是，他我这的，他的等到了，他刚才大面的去个大面，他刚才大面的了，刚才大面到这个。 本来俺是个的，俺这个有点的主把就是嘛一把，俺到个爬到这一把这热掉了，这一把的，但也把你打这个，但是也把你打的，俺告诉的，大概这告诉的，大概这告诉的，那些关的接把接的，那些关的接把的，他刚才有点的主把一拿他，俺告诉的，他就主的么就接把接的，俺刚才这边呢，俺吃完这边呢，俺这边个告诉这边今天都这边呢。 特别对这东西边呢，大概这个我的那个那些个接把钱呢，那些个接把钱呢，刚啥的，刚啥打是吧？打电话丢个都，东西丢个名都，他们这什么主笔音，在那个当过打的个这都，这嘛就把人呐，打的，我也或者嘛些把人呐，这他把这个都嘛的吧。 我打现在他的，可是打的，夸了他把这猪头嘛的，夸大的给他是夸之下，我的那个打的这个那些个接把接去，是吧？打的，然后呢就把这对吧？伊那，的夸个经济多，夸的他都不么多，打的夸了他把了，打的，然后就把买一把的毛出多。 俺弟弟俺一把都，然后都毛主把一把我车把了，我车呢，弟那路车上我就到把了，那些个接把钱呢，我车把送不到，我送不了，我去。
And so then, in the context of this the wisdom or the perfection of wisdom, it's looking at the status of the self. It has two particular outlines of how to meditate on ascertaining the self of persons, and then how to meditate gaining ascertation of the self of phenomena. And so here, in terms of the first one, looking at how we look at meditating on the self of persons. And here it's established in terms of how to analyze, looking at the 4 key points. The 4 key points of, first of all, really ascertaining the object of refutation. In other words, what it is that we are trying to refute. So we have to understand that self, how that certain sense of self appears to the mind. And it's all about gaining conviction in the efficacy of these 4 key points. You know, after we've done that, then we look at the full set of possibilities, how that self could exist if it did. And then looking at the determining that that self does not exist as not truly one with the aggregates, or not truly different from the aggregates, or separate from the aggregates. So it's a question of, at the beginning, at the outset, of really recognizing carefully what the object of negation is, what this self that we're trying to negate is, this self that seems to exist as something that is innately there, that is self-established, that is truly established, that is coming from its own side, and to kind of understand this self that keeps us in cyclic existence, keeps us going around in cyclic existence again and again and again, and that how that exists to the mind, what is the problem with that existence, and so on, and then how to eradicate it.
我觉得是他这个刚才也那也怎么讲？刚才人他一点的主办，那个多少去有的，在遇的你过，但你个没得，你个没得，我他刚才也那讲，我讲是吧？也吧，那我不了解这，俺查吧也那所以的，他这，他如果他电话主办一般那，原来电话主办进就有过来，原来电话主办怎么？今年这个有这些吧就有嘛的，他这里。我这个查把给别人讲，俺这呢，他什么的了？俺这刚才今天东西嘛，他原来这个年吧一那，这个他可是他跟他怎么准备这个一嘛一那，俺这面他可是一嘛一那，他跟他心不多，他得怎么接这个？我这讲
And so then that the 4 key points are really looking at this self that is, you know, appears as if it's something objectively existent, and as such, it ought then to be possible to point that out, to see that if it claims to be something that is objectively existent, it should be something that we can actually point a finger at. And it's all about then really recognizing that sense of self. And that is the first of the key points to gaining certainty with regard to the way the object of refutation appears. And then we look into the second of the key points is called determining the full set of possibilities. So we're saying if such an objectively existent self is possible, then it must exist either as one with the aggregates or separate from the aggregates. These are the only 2 possibilities for something that is truly or objectively existent. And so, and then the third of these key points is then, okay, we look at these possibilities in turn. So determining that they are not truly one with the aggregates or the same as the aggregates. That's the third possibility or third key point.
这他什么特别经济都也没呢，他特别经济都也没呢，那他特别特别经济嘛，主要但他所谓俺的父母俺的经济有当，经济有当年吧那父母俺的经济有为那俺就过来给他看点吧，对嘛是吧？
네, 참아디 랩스톤데, 소그디, 이네, 랑가 쉐야데, 가야요마.
我的大地现在压着的，那人就是那个什么，他今天看到把那个等的多，我的他什么特别，今天都也没念的是，他说俺的父母俺的进度有多年嘛，那就过来，给的父母打呢，在起的，马月打的讲，马不就是写什么的，现在刚才进了父母俺有把写多，俺也觉得他们俺有把捐钱多，有把捐了。 양면아 야나 강사 지기 마시도 부모가 대 참에 직장 주에 좋아서게 내가 도마 유배 대다수가 나한테 부모가 지금 많이 더 nhập 보다 부모도 지금 많이 받대 다 지금 좀제도 삼았다는 데는 얘도 맞히고 했어 야 좀제 저번에 삼는 셔야 대다수가 나한테 부모가 지금 주바이나 부모가 깨지 제가 싫도 로디 송와 따지 축도도 주변 나디야 깨지 제가 주죠 그래 다 축도도 라와 좋아처럼 매게 쓰고 봐 와다들 대기지 제가 주죠 사실 걔들 부모가 다이나 걔다 지과천도 조셔서 배쳐서 다 부모 깨지 제가 싫도 로디 송와 따지 축도도 주변 나디야 깨지 제가 주로 깨지 제가 남나 제그래서 제가 이나 다 깨지 제가 나디에 깨지 같이 나 찍도 주범 타대도 주 찍도 주범이나 책나치다 책디 안에 참여 찍도 주에 타대도 주나 제 타대 담라다 제와스케 요마데 매 타대 그래서 제와 좀 제매 타대 인고 그 말이 이미 거 있죠 라신 그 주범 다단 내가 그 것도 라신 그 주범 찍인다 메시를 줘라 라신 그 주범 타대 이마이나 제매 때문에 그 타대 인고 도스 아니 주발에 간다 니저 소소와 대다 규지 동안 지금 이些숨에 치르서 올라서
So then just to a quick review of some of the content that we covered on last week, and we're looking at the third of these key points, which is ascertaining the lack of truly existing unity. If you look at your English translation there on page 142, so I'll just read through that, saying so we're saying here, you may wonder if the self, which is held in this way, exists as one and the same as the five aggregates. And so the first quote is from Entering the Middle Way by Arya Chandrakirti, which says, if the aggregates are the self, then because there are many aggregates, there should also be many selves. According to this statement, since a person consists of five aggregates, then similarly, a self also should consist of five separate selves. Or if a self were only one indivisible thing, then the five aggregates should also be one indivisible thing, etc. I'm saying because there are many logical flaws here, you should think a self which is held to be like that could not be one and the same as the aggregates. And then further, he's saying if a self which is held to be like that existed as one and the same as the five aggregates, then just as the five aggregates arise and perish, according to that thinking, a self which exists independently should also arise and perish. But of course, it's not seen to do that. Therefore, again, we should be able to negate this particular point of view. And then a quote from, again, Arya Nagarjuna's fundamental verses of the Middle Way. If the aggregates are the self, then the self should have the qualities of arising and perishing. So just like the five aggregates arise and perish, similarly, according to that way of thinking, an independent self should also arise and perish. And then do the prior and future moments of that self which arises and perishes exist as a single entity or as multiple entities? If they exist as one, then the self of this life would be one and the same as the self of previous and future lives. If they exist as different in the general sense, this doesn't necessarily mean that they are different with no relationship whatsoever, but they exist as actually different, each with its own intrinsic nature, because this is what is under discussion here, a self which has this sense of objective or independent or intrinsic nature of its own, then it must be the case that they have absolutely no relationship. Again, a quote from Entering the Middle Way, things which are distinct in terms of their individual characteristics cannot logically constitute a single series.
다 책난치다 책난치다 책디 나송 제와 때문에 다 라신거 주바 지바이나 다 제와 때문에 매배자 자 제와 때문에 매배 타대 이노냐나 다 제와 때문에 매배저 대단 좀 다 레베 제바다 제와 취사 와서 그거다 다 교육거리 와다 로아까지 제가 취사 와서 계산 내가 도마 유배 대다 소양가데 포봉가다 직도 맞죠 왔냐나 포봉가다 직도 좀 뭐도 내가 이나니 咸阳在那说话，大概俺的碰碰俺的这个中呢，怎么准备进行呗？他们这都这个就做不成。但当然，俺打碰碰俺年万两百多打，是吧？俺打碰碰俺年万两百多，碰碰俺打给年万两家买一把烧鸡，年万多嘛，就这咱现在年万两百打一把一呢，确实打你两百就先送给去了是。是咸阳啊啥大部你前面给这个把人呢，这边绿的呀，前面都就了。但当然，这边哪怕也有也是，也有就了没就是，给的也是人家们比，的人家们比如说哪怕也有现做，哪怕也没有，我送给周边。这个多是，那话要是哪怕也有个是也没有我真的用过多是吧？我这用过多是不懂，哪怕也有呢，也你把有过用过多是吧？但没有呢，这边可是没有呢，这边绿的了，有没有个产业有没是？但有个嘛是哪位呢有没有个产业有的产业就多是就业起的。那么这来是哪所有呢？他们这的有啊，就是给我解释。给我讲，来你进来是你用钱，先到他的如果就先送给去了是。
So, so accordingly, if you think the three selves of past, present, and future are different and have absolutely no relationship, in that case, you could encounter the karma which you had not committed, and the karma which you had committed could dissipate. Because this has many logical flaws, you should realize that the self cannot exist as one and the same as the five aggregates. This is another argument against that possibility. And it goes on then, also as the self were held to be the same as as one with the five aggregates, then because this oneness is established as true, then that all parts have to be all one. All parts become one. So then you can say that that the self or the I or the self that which appropriates the aggregates, and the aggregates that are appropriated by that self could not happen. It couldn't be two entities like that. They would be just one. Therefore, this is an impossibility, and therefore that is showing that this argument here is flawed, and it contradicts that particular argument. This is further backed up by the Root of Wisdom, again by the fundamental treatise on wisdom by Nagarjuna, where he says, if the self were the grasping aggregates, then the self as you view it could not exist. And again, it goes on to look into another argument. So again, if you look at if the self and the aggregates were one partless entity, then the body, for example, one of the aggregates, again, would have to be a partless entity. So again, if you look at the body and you see, say, the right hand moving, then you have to ask, does the left hand move also or not? And when you look at this through your own experience, you can see if the right hand is moving, that the left hand doesn't necessarily have to move at all. And this again immediately contradicts the premise that is made at the beginning, that the self and the aggregates could be one entity. Because if you have one part of the body that is moving and one part that is not moving, that immediately tells you there are two parts to that body, and so they can't be a partless entity. And again, from the commentary on valid cognition, on Dignaga's Compendium of Valid Cognition, it says, it is incorrect to say that when a hand moves, the whole body moves. Hence, this is contradicted by direct perception. Since their action is not the same, this proves that the parts are separate from one another.
当然像咸阳是前面有嘛呢，但他的 지다 차제 배차로 이내야 다 참여해서 그랬다. 뭐 여봐 이나 참여 여봐 이나 다 위드 참고 지라 당고 초시에서 뒤처럼 두개 지자도 거에서 위드 참여 샤드라 때에 뭐지 누들라 때서 마대 다디 마다와 이나 위드 참고 때라 샤드라 때와 때라 누들라 마대와 찬이 예배 대 참여 이번 냠주고 도스 참여 이번 냠주고 참여 kelleri chara nyam tu dos ribe nyog dos ta tena gyuje deda kosa chigdu gyurbe gyuje deda chigdu jiwe gongbu ang gyuje zamdu gyula deda na ringwa la soge namsha tamcha miteba gyursa ring tong se nga chigla döni xiao wa döni xiao ma da ma deba ringbu se da tu se xiao ya para yo marwa che sa sumju bale ruge chigjar ko ana 차라 주차 주도 주고 다장 거직나 공부한 주차 점도 좀 시험에 치렀어.
Again, a further argument dealing with the possibility of things being partless again. And here it goes right down to the very smallest, most subtle atomic particles, saying, okay, so we look at atomic particles then, we say that these are partless, but it's clear that, particles have a top and a bottom and four sides, and that you're saying that they must be, kind of like particles surrounded by these aspects of it. But I ask you the question then, if we're looking, if say subtle particle is facing towards the east, is it also seen to be facing towards the west, the very same place, the very same point? And you say, it doesn't face like that. That if it faces towards the east, then it doesn't show that it's facing towards the west. And again, that's an issue then, because it shows that the argument of partlessness doesn't hold, and it contradicts that particular argument. And saying too that okay, people are pointing out if the most subtle particle, atomic particle, was to be one entity, then it would have to be one unified kind of mass or lump wrapped up in a single unit. But it's not seen to be like that. And if that was the case as well, then everything that came made out of particles like that, then there would be an impossibility to have any sense of size. There'd be no kind of a long or short or no kind of solid mass that could be possible made out of such partless particles. Therefore, that whole argument of partless particles is contradicted and damaged and becomes untenable. And again, this is pointed out in 30 verses by Vasubandhu, where he says, if an atom is surrounded by 6 sides at once, as we said, the top and the bottom and the 4 directions, then the atom would have 6 parts. If the 6 sides were in one place, then a solid mass would become merely a single atom.
폼봉하다 찍다 배제다 좀도 좀다 폼봉하다 타대도 좀 냐바이나 폼봉 다 폼봉가 뭐야 소소 레레네스 제베 제소 딘남체게 폼보시 손도 뭐 진주죠 손도다 뭐 제스도가 뭐 진주죠 대신도 소봉소 레레네스 제베 제소 대다 소야 나데 디오시 대주요 말라 대주요 가지고 그래 여발라 대주 민도배 대다수야 나한테 포봉하다 타대도 마주반냥도 삼삼 다 다 포봉가 서비스 줘도 나한테도 두고도서 다 타대도 여봐이나 어디 가서 마주반냥도 삼삼 대다수야 나한테서 포봉하다 타대도 줘봐이나 다 소지 포봉스도 서비스 줘서 대다수야 나한테 대주 거대 나大部分这边他这个话是他的一边，那大些写了或者许多他下面许多不过对我些 대주 요바 시 이베 치테 자체를 다지 내원 내발라 셰도 세바니마이 게데 셰나 게데 셰나 레메번 어서 송유 링나 송도메 제송베 치르서.
And so that to complete the analysis related to that third key point of ascertaining that the aggregates are one with the self is one with the aggregates. So the next point is then determining that the self and the aggregates are not truly different. And here it looks into that saying, okay, if I accept then that the self and the aggregates are not truly one entity, then what about that they are separate entities? And here it's saying, okay, we'll look at the five aggregates, so say looking at the form aggregate and so on, and we take them individually and separate them out, and then and write out to the kind of like consciousness as well as the fifth of those five aggregates, then separately, we should be able to recognize, the self separate from them. That should be, left. The residue should be self left there. But this is not seen to be the case. So if you take the aggregate of self or body, and separate it out there, and then you the kind of perception of the self as we know it should be shown to be there, but it is not seen to be there. And therefore, you have to reach the conclusion that the self and the aggregates are not truly separate, not truly multiple entities, and that these because when you separate out the different aggregates, such as the form aggregate, etc., that it should be clear that the self is kind of clearly visible there when they are separated out, but that is not seen to be the case. For example, if you take a horse and a donkey, for example, you can see that they are separate entities without connection. And if you take away the horse from that scenario, then you are left with the donkey clearly visible there. And that becomes an obvious thing. So it's not the case when we look at the self and the aggregates when we're talking about true existence. And again, this is confirmed by Nagarjuna's Root of Wisdom, where he says, we cannot accept that the self is different from the aggregates with which it is afflicted. If these were different, it would be possible to perceive it without there being any aggregates, but it is not so perceived.
간제 다 야제 마제 가서 간제 풍부가라 딱 담게 나지만도 다 자원이네 두고도 삼내지겠지. 풍부가네 딱 담 제대지네 딱 나지 뭐 진교를 했다면도 질레시에 나지 두고도 쳐도 매되겠지.
And so it's saying here that if the claim is that that the self exists as something separate from the aggregates, therefore that if you take away the aggregates, that the self that is being asserted, there should be something that can be pointed to. But when it comes down to it, and we separate all of the different aggregates out, we do not see any remaining self that can be pointed to.
다 대다 내시 제발라 때네 아니 나질 현재 저 수와 따지 가면봐 내라 다 대대 내시 제발라 때네 다 간제 내시 제발도 나질 현재 수와 따지 가지 여봐이나 다 니고 이거요 말이야 니가 매봐 인사 다 가서 다 내시 제발라 때네 나질 현재 수와 따지 가면봐 예봐나 어다 예봐나 다 Geshe Konchok Tsering and Jinga Jewe say to Jangwa what that written the Taka the Deke Taka Kasoda Nishi Cheva Jen, that Jewe not money but Tagarankala. And the Jika Kasoda Taka Geshe Konchok Taka Mangaba Kotoka Sua Takis Nazi Hindi Sua Taki Nam Never Yabana Geshe Konchok Tsering Jingota 제외해서 제주도는 잡아 잡고 그랬어. 당가자 각자 아니 제바제네. 내시 제바제 많이 왔다가랑 각자 대대지가 다가자 아니 가서 증거的这位军将그랬어. 자오사.
And so it's saying here that through the analyzing via these 4 key points, then we need to come to a sense of conviction with regard to the lack of a self that appears to exist as if it was an instinctively generated or a truly established self, that such a self cannot exist and does not exist. And that, so it's saying here that, that when we look for that self and honestly look through the process of the 4 key points and analyzing, we're looking for it, kind of sincerely. And it's that reaching that point of not finding it again and again and again that gives us the conviction, the certainty that such a self, such an innately existing, truly existing, objectively existing self is not possible, is an impossibility. And and saying here that once you find that certainty there, that you really have confidence in that, then you should try to sustain that through meditative concentration, single-pointedly, free of any mental thinking or mental distraction. And that this is very, very important, that we get this point of reaching that point of not finding the self that you are searching for, analyzing for, and then being able to remain specifically precisely on that mere not finding, the mere object of negation, again and again and again. This is the way to do the meditation.
아니 중세 중도 송아이나 담아 중도 셰도 송아나 중세 중도 송아이나 아니 내가 뭐 나지 나다기야 그래서 제바체네 내시 제발라 때네 아니 데메게 게셰 제바체 체네 아니 안다가랑 로샤네 양 가자 가좀 다가랑 갈 로샤네 어디데 전 다가제 디 아니 롤 콤지 때네 아니 딱 예반이 답소 그래서 무여와 어디데.
And then it further advises that when we're doing this meditation and endeavoring to gain that sense of habituation through this analysis, that when that sort of concentration loses its strength and we lose our kind of like grip on that mere absence of the object of negation, then it's saying for beginners, they can again employ the analysis of the 4 key points in order to induce the certainty with regard to the lack of true existence again.
차단지 내시 제가 차단지 먹고 봤잖아. 딱그 로토 안 남제 난질 행gel랑가 지다 나와다 두마두 제발라 때네 내시 제바다 자와는 아니 가서 대매기 예바전도 딱 개치주도 대매기 예바전도 같이 개치주도 와 어디 가서 예바전 제 대다 제바집에 타서 내다고 남랑 다 공부했네 공부했나 된데 어서 주고 중세자 민주 배 nga ribo mido nyambe tana tam chi nga meba chadoga nga meba sa takacha nga ribo mido nyambe sa tanga gewa shi gweshin deda tanga chibo chuana ume tawa tangbo nyeba she cha wasta ume tawa ngocho ba sorochi sigire so chicha.
So it's saying then for those of a kind of a greater intelligence who are a bit more advanced in their meditation, etc., that when they kind of lose strength in their ascertainment of the mere lack of the object of negation, they can, without necessarily going through the 4 key points again, but they can observe again whether the innately grasped self is it established in the way it appears or not to their minds, and in this way they gain again they refine that conviction in the lack of true existence. And saying overall through this kind of analysis, that the kind of end point is for a beginner to be able to reach that sense of understanding of that that neither the I nor the self exists as a real object in relation to the aggregates, and that kind of itself should be an unnerving experience that produces almost a sense of fear, terror, not almost, but really should present a sense of terror and fear in the mind, because one has the impression that the self does not exist at all. And so it almost goes over, you go over that cliff into nihilism. And so it's saying that fear is, for a beginner, the first signs of really having found the middle way position with regard to the true nature of reality.
或者是他刚才这个让些个马主把银把银脏，他真的中央的外边过去，让些个马主把银把银脏，你没把的是蛮不着，让些个马主把银把银脏，他越当的真的中央的外边没把的是，真的主把银把银脏，让些的主把早年的要么他今年的去做这个方式够多，让些个马主把热，就这个是我真的中央的话是，他真的中央银把银脏，让些的主当过来要嘛的是。但今年的是让些个马主把银脏，可没把的是嘛过去，让些个马主把银把的银把了，真的可真的中央搞多年去，真的中央银把银脏，让些个主当过来要嘛的是，是吧？但让这个主呢，电过也没把瞧不着，电的主把银呢，让些个主搞当过来没把瞧不着，但今年的电的中央银把银脏，让些个马主把打这个要的，让些个马主把银把银脏。真的中央银把脏，让些个马主把打这个要是，或者他做，这我现在当你个来掏钱多多，你们那样我们到完了，告诉的，单位结巴的，当大的马做完去了，单位结巴当大的马了，让他切他，让他当大了同你把当这个谈你了同你把，捐有个有把银脏，捐有个有把银脏，你或者捐的。但我有那时当那的教育要嘛的，一两个都来当过了，人家的要嘛印章，你可让些个嘛，主要因为就在这个真的中华的多是，让些个嘛，这个你个么多是嘛，一般讲让些个嘛，主要因为就在这个真的中华的多是，真的中华因为就在这个让些个嘛，主要的多，可把嘛主要一般搞懂，但真的就在中华一呢，比样呢样都三不单的，你可这个说到说中华一呢，这边。안고 지금 가서도 토사지 장아제 안에 손은 게 자, 야 고쳐서는 안디 로라 송토와지. 아니 예반지 토와지 물어와.
So here, what we are encouraged to employ is the kind of both sides of this reasoning, to point out to ourselves that when I come to the conclusion that phenomena, the self, lacks any inherent existence, it automatically leads to that infers that then that phenomena exists in dependence, and that I, the self, arises in dependence, and that because the self exists in dependence, therefore it cannot possibly be something that has an independent existence or an inherent existence or an objective existence. So one is always kind of playing with the two sides here. Like lack of inherent existence tells me that phenomena arise and I arise in dependence. that I, arising independence, automatically refutes the possibility that I could have any inherent or objective existence. So this is important for beginners to avoid the extremes of the nihilism on the one hand of refuting too much, and reification on the other hand of establishing too much existence. And that so this is the middle way. This is why it's called the middle way between those two extremes. And so this is the key way of being able to constantly maintain that center of the path, center of the way sort of reasoning. That again, every time I reach that not finding of the the lack of finding of the way in which things should appear to us, that it is lacking that objective or independent or inherent existence, that immediately brings to mind the fact, oh, then phenomena arise independence. Oh yeah, they arise independence on and cause and conditions part and so on merely being imputed. And because phenomena arise independence, that automatically tells me that proves that they cannot possibly exist independently or objectively. So you keep those two kind of points to view so that you don't slip into the extremes.
그래. 당가서 가서 뭐 당고 제다 대바 주바이나 줍세의 신고 대바 주바이나 주와촌에 매게 거고요. 그 주와지 태그 돌아 그 대바 뭐좀 다 되고요. 봐. 그 주와태의 주다 깨라 날리고 다 되고요. 봐. 주와태 당가 대바 주바는 아니 그 주와촌에 맞으면 주다 깨라 남말리게 거고. 주다 깨라 날리고 돌아 그 대바 뭐좀 다 되고. 진짜 그 리페어 좋다디. 내처 로드 하고 있나?
We're going to saying here to use that natural law of dependence, of arising independence. And so establishing that very firmly in the mind is very important, that self or phenomena must arise in the independence upon, like, for example, causes and conditions like all phenomena. And that any independent entity cannot possibly, it like precludes them arising independent. So it's an impossibility that inherent or independent phenomena could exist. And so one keeps that in mind. And furthermore, again, I was saying that, gaining confidence in the way phenomena and self do exist and the way they do not exist also kind of like gives us confidence in the whole process of practice, that practices such as the accumulation of merit and the purification of negativities and all that are giving an extra jolt of inspiration.
다 뒤에 아서 냥을 나라 신기 매바 예베 예시 담증에 왔다 냥을 나 신기 마 주베 그래서 다 냥을서 나라 신기 마 주베 예베 예시 담증증 왔다 나고라 각자 전주 가담제 동상에베 개발 이대도 전에 아니 제주도 장고랬어 장완에 나갔다고 정수다서 다 냠자 나갔다고 정수로서 제도도 다 제도도 다 냠자 들레 당네 제도도 나라서베 최 담자 아니 가서도 주마다고 남르도 가서 고바차에서 주마다고 남르도 고바차에서 그때 윤전 주마난 거다 나왔다 주요 말이었어 다 주마케게 녀다셔봐 어디나 시체 그 주마케 달아난 거다 나왔다 말에 그 녀도로 어디나 시체 대야서 냠샤도 그 대매지에서 녀시 슈자고 장발라 때네 제도도사 간샤 탐자 나야 때문에 가서 때문에서 주바다비 남도 또 차와 라버차고서 차와라 라버차고서
So and so then the way in which you kind of like meditate thereafter is that from the side of the self, and we see that there is this lack of inherent existence. And that is something that we need to gain an unshakable certainty with regard to. That's something that is kind of absolutely definite. There's a lack of inherent existence. And then from the side of appearance, and then when phenomena, will continually appear to us, the mind, that we have this absolute certainty that they are kind of this, that they are this emptiness that they are the mere negation of the object of negation through existence. And that we have these two aspects constantly in, from the side of the self and the side of appearance, and to be able to meditate on that single-pointedly is known as the absorption resembling space.
나라서도 다들 검대도 뭐 이제 거기다 냠샤도 다 냠샤서도 다 세네 검대 다 이게 내당 돌아 배팅 사부 개자래 다 이내 나라서가 저 검을서도 뭐 이제 저기 빠다 다 저기 뭐다 저기 가서 동리를 봐 섬샤부 가자 가서 아니 되네요 춘대나 뭐 좋은데 아니 그 디디스 맞잖아 나라랑 심해 봐지 봐 차다 제가 다 이제 지금 돈이 고속도 동인데서 다 냠샤도 마저스네 아니 그 나에 라시면 가서 대바주가 난게 나와도 마주가 대패 냐마 숙청부여 다 것도 돈이 고속도 원내다 로가로 다 가서 내가 뭐 진바이네 소 검자도 돈이 돈이 가자 가서 검 아니 되네 약히 마저 되네 야네 야도 가서 다 가자 나라 라시면 봐 삼로 다이치 수고 여러 거들
And so here, again, is pointing out this absorption resembling space. It's of course a terminology related to, kind of high-level meditators who have achieved maybe a mental quiescence and so on. And for us as beginners, what we can how we can interpret this is that we do our meditation on emptiness, on the lack of objective existence. And reaching that point of the mere object negation of the object of negation, and remaining on that as best we can. Then when we arise from that meditation, then we again have these phenomena appearing to the mind, but we no longer kind of accede to that appearance in the way we did before. That we have this idea that these phenomena kind of lack any objective existence, and in fact that they are like an illusion, as it says in the subsequent attainment part, meaning that when we arise from meditation, it's saying that when we now regard the self or any phenomena, that we view the appearances like the play of illusion, and that and so therefore from the very powerful certainty of the lack of true existence in the meditative absorption aspect of the meditation, that then when we subsequently arise from that, then whatever arises to the mind, we are absolutely sure that this is like the play of illusion. It is again lacking any objective existence. It appears in one way, but it's lacking any true truth, and it's like the play of illusion. And that's how we should train the mind.
난 당연히 이제 지금 동반 얘기 삼로때다 다 잡아든 이제 자주서 가봐이네 이제 지금 참대가 이렇게 되면 가봐이네 그 지금 맨날 동반 있을 저 간제지만 그 내당 시가 요마 그봐 내당 시한테 가봐이네 삼로 다 유에 되겠지 맨날 저지가 칼랄레바 있네 라시가 뭐 삼로 당사 유에 되겠지 그봐 아니 지금 소속 라다 지금 소소랑의 돈에 삼로다 시수 통화이네 안디 나와다디 아니 좀도 뭐도 아니 제바체네 아니 예바니 답제지 그라 라시가 두바이나 아니 거주다 조사들 니고데 니금도 와 왔다 라시가 뭐도 가봐이네 삼로 당지여지 다 이제 보다 다 최제 나 최제 라시가 뭐도데 데데 이메치스 아 김세 그 다 최제 뭐 맞을때 근데 이게 쳤어. 그러나 멜로나게 제시스 멜로나게 속에 차원의 시. 어떻게됐어? 어떻게 이제 이랬잖아. 아니 좀 시스라나. 어떻게됐어? 대마메때 근데 이게 쳤어. 과자 대마메가 좀 제때 이게 쳤어. 대마메가 좀 니게 뭐도 많이 봤지. 대마메때 근데 이게 쳤어. 근데 이거 인자 그 대마메가 좀 제 하고 두겠지.
So when we are meditating on emptiness, on love, on compassion, and so on, of course, to be able to kind of sit in formal meditation is one thing, but it's not absolutely necessary at all in order to reflect on this subject matter. And in fact, we should be able to integrate the meditations and reflections on this subject matter in all aspects of life. And that after all, when we're talking about meditating on emptiness, and, we're talking about the nature of reality, the status of reality itself. And so that when we're out and about and we're looking at any phenomenon, we again to remind ourselves again, that this does not exist in the way it appears. It is lacking any such existence that is independent and objective. And that this regard to the food we eat, we remind ourselves this food that we're eating lacks any objective existence, inherent existence. The people that we see, again, that we lack any objective existence. So we, go through the analysis to the point of conviction again. That go through the looking for such an objectively existent person and not finding them again. Very, very useful. And that here the lack of objective existence immediately reminds us that phenomena, this person, this food, whatever I'm analyzing, arises in independence. And that this take the subject self, lacks true existence because it arises in dependence, because it's a dependent arising or dependent origination. And that's the same for all phenomena. When we put that to the test analysis in our daily lives as we go about, that kind of not finding of what we're looking for proves a lack of true existence, infers the fact that things arise in dependence. You can say like looking at a reflection in the mirror, or like the example here I mentioned, like an illusion, like the play of illusion. This is what a phenomena appear as, and that this is saying that the mere not finding of that phenomena to exist in the way it appears, it automatically proves that it arises in dependence.
What is it? But the cafe now, coffee shop now, coffee shop, and the cup of coffee chicken. The mom made it, they may choose.
So when we get to the cafe and we have our coffee, now we can say this coffee, the subject, this cup of coffee, lacks any true existence because it is a dependent origination.
So
yeah, we can do this many times because we can have many coffees.
Yeah, but the coffee, yeah, but you tell them to watch it. What your what in the coffee chago.
Oh yeah, we can establish the truth of that in terms of coffee, because we can get down to all of the different parts that are required in order to make the coffee.
What did the Chakaja? What did the Kawaii? It is a coach to tell student that you never need up chin. What do you know? What
So we need to know is whatever situation we're in, wherever we are, to do that analysis to arrive at that sense of increasing conviction with regard to this point.
That gets you the so tabo, that rushing much when yet she will get some better. That rushing much because Dala mean and Chaka lost who came with what? Then Dala mean the Dara she never yet she will get some better.
And initially to center on the lack of objective existence of a self. The self entity, that is most important because of course that's what we're most familiar with, and so to be able to counteract that and to understand that lack of objective existence of a self indicates that it arises in dependence.
What the nature shot and that was the swashing strata lama lao contour, running the permata so some such a permata and by the lama tagging of the Karakoso to the Sunday because the neighbor was temperature Sunday Kumato with just some such and then that need the done of that logic of Sang of Kaja. Then Akajo died on Monument Mamus, Tomasha to Sanga Liasum Kora. Then Arabasana the quarter that she was what in the chat, some caught. Then over yet I must now go for some cottage. And they died in Kitela, Utila, and lama tuwa tuwa cha dile wese chu rangi chukwane kandi ka wese tuwa mewa diwa chi ta kanda ta kiawa tuwa ta lyo nga isu ka diwa pa cha zi jawa pa cha so cha mewa cha so ta yabu shivu chung so sa kiawa tuwa ta jiga kasa de geje ta kanja jiga kaso la ta chwe jiba geje su tango mewa kari yuwa ina za lo tile gyön tija jane kana zi daba lamja pa chi cha tuwa yabu chung so samsa che 아니 소소 시도 저 로드 년랭게 저 라마샤에서 구도 현재 제가 다그 라마샤에서 구를 주소 소소 셈데 시도 저 셈 년랭게 라마샤에서 투도 현재 제가 소소 셈데 라마샤에서 투를 주소 네디야我他我不知他两个另外是라마샤에서 구조도 뭐 예매 찾소서 네디야 내가 견 탐제 장네 하는 가서 가디 이거 쳐서 주소 소서 라마샤에서 구를 좀 투발을 위해서 심지어 장도는 심지어 탐제 라마샤에서 구조도 뭐 예매 찾고 어디로 공부시 네디야 가서 가디 이거 쳐서 교수 성원들 공부시 가디 이거 쳐서 라마샤이jas으면 라마샤이jas으니까 가서 딱 이제 라마샤이jas으니까 시작한 교수 성원들 공부시
So that yes, so we leave it there for today, and then we again now recognizing that we have Guru Muninja Vajradhara on our crown, and we're about to invite him to our heart center. So we prepare the lotus sun and moon disk mandala seat there, and by reciting the invocation verse of Royce and Precious Root Guru, come take a lotus and moon seat placed here at my heart. Keep me safe in your kindness. Bestow on me the attainments of your body, speech, and mind. Thrice that the Guru begins the journey down through our central channel, arrives at our heart center, and remains there steadfast until we attain enlightenment. The petals of the lotus fold over, enfolding the figure, are sealed by 5-pronged white vajra at the tip, and then surrounded by the mantras of Shakyamuni Buddha mantra in a clockwise direction, the mantra of Manjushri in an anti-clockwise direction, and the mantra of dependent origination in an anti-clockwise direction. And then from within, light rays emanate out, permeating through the petals and through every atom of our bodies, from the crown of our heads to the soles of our feet, purifying all negativities and obscurations since the beginning of time, and all degenerations of the 4 elements, and the imbalances of our channels, winds, and drops, and that including all of the imprints of the negativities and so on, and so that we are kind of rendered absolutely perfect for the attainment of enlightenment. And then through the combination of my own most subtle wind acting as the main cause, with the body of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own body transforms into the enlightened body of the Buddha. And then through the combination of my own most subtle mind acting as the main cause, with the mind of the Buddha acting as the cooperative conditions, my own mind is transformed into the enlightened mind of a Buddha. And I reach that realization of having attained a state of enlightenment where my body, speech, and mind now become inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. And this is absolutely wonderful. And the place that I am in is transformed into the celestial mansion of an enlightened being. And then I send out light rays from my own heart center as a fully enlightened being, equal in number to all of the sentient beings in all the 6 realms of existence. And as the lights touch all of these sentient beings, they are automatically relieved of any negativities and obscurations, and they attain the state of enlightenment spontaneously. And the place that they are in is transformed into the palatial mansion of an enlightened being.
What is it? Don't know. Simja Tamja Lama Shaja Singing, Taka Jaga, Simja Tanja Lama Shaja Singing, Kuru Juata, and teacher to that, so the Gaso de Jawaka, social to you, Toma Pata, something what to commercial.
And then all of the sentient beings who have attained that state of enlightenment, all the virtue that has been accrued in order to bring them so, the one who is the agent of that, they're merely lacking an objective existence and are merely imputed by thought. And this brings forth bliss, which combines with the voidness, and I abide in the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness. And so we know in our dedication that we are doing this now at the level of imagination, but of course I make a powerful promise and dedication that it will become manifest for real as quickly as possible. And I also make the vow that any kind of like means whatsoever to be able to generate the necessary realizations of loving kindness, compassion, of generating the mind of enlightenment and realization of emptiness. I will use all instances of life, be they good, bad, or indifferent, to kind of use them as conducive conditions for furthering these minds of the mind of enlightenment and of the realization of emptiness. So let's do our Lam Rim dedication prayer. For my two collections, vastest space that I have amassed from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives and history. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time, with my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined. May I reveal this treasure of happiness and peace. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time, by even this great path to enlightenment completed, due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their children. May all human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may they always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. Lama Sangye Forgiveness Rowo Chikyamarupa Sala Gopasho
Chen Tsong Kapa Lo San Drai Pe Jabla So Me Se Wei Chen Re Si Dream Kien Pe Wan Po Jan Gam Chen Ke Pe Su Chen Song Kapa Lo San Drat Pe Jabla So Me Se Wei Chen Re Si Dream Kien Pe Wan Po Jan Gam Chen Ke Pe Su Chen Song Kapa Lo San Drat Pe Jabla So
You are of luck
to
to
strive with great treasure of compassion, not aimed at true existence, and Geshe Master flawless wisdom, as well as Vajrapani, destroyer of hordes of demons without exception. Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the sage of the land and snows, Tsongkhapa, at your feet I make requests.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gela. Thank you, Noel.
Thank you,
Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Noel.
Thank you, Noel.
Thank you,
Thank
Gela.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Master.
See you next week.
Yeah, bye.
Yeah,
See ya.
Bye.
take care, everybody.
Tashi Dalek.
See you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Take care. Everyone take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.